How important is it for us to have a handle on this issue? I'm talking about us as people who are giving spiritual guidance to the masses, whether it's through our writings or through our verbal communications on various forums and platforms. How significant is this issue? I mean, we're dealing with so many very transcendently important issues in our culture. How do you rank this?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. It's vital because you have human beings that are suffering, really. Now, let me go back for a second and say the number of transgender individuals suffering with gender dysphoria still is relatively low for as much hype as there is out there about this. The number is relatively low, but it's important for us to understand dogmatically, as we've already discussed it, about the sexlessness of the soul and there not being a sexual differentiation internally from the outside bodily sex. But then also to move from the dogmatic position to the pastoral. And that pastoral acknowledges that the feelings people are having, the thoughts that they're having are indeed real, and they're causing them a great deal of pain. And by acknowledging and affirming this, regardless of whether or not we believe the content of those feelings is true. Yeah, let's say a biological man feels like he's a woman. It may not be true. It's not true that he's actually a woman, but those feelings and that discrepancy is a point of suffering for them. And while we may not be able to alleviate that from them, we can work towards a reassignment of their identity from identity as a female trapped in a male body to a child of God.
Yeah, so expand on that a little bit. You're saying in essence that gender dysphoria is a real thing. You're not
Yes.
denying gender dysphoria. It's
Right.
real. But I want you to expand on that from a different aspect, and that is there's a media narrative that has been foisted upon us. So young kids at an early age are being sort of brainwashed, if I can use that term.
Yeah.
If you take all of the information on one side of a ledger and you suppress it, and you only communicate the information on the other side of a ledger, that by definition is not education. It's brainwashing, really. And so many kids at an early age are subject to this, not only through educational avenues, but also through entertainment avenues. I was taking a walk the other day. I think I mentioned on a podcast, and I see the kids are not looking around. They're not kicking balls at one another. They're looking at their smartphones, and they're being indoctrinated in some sense into a particular way of thinking. And so, at an early age, kids start to think about: Am I really a boy?
Yes.
Am I a girl trapped in a boy's body? All these thoughts that I never even experienced when I was growing up are now commonplace.
Yeah. And it's there's a wonderful quote from St. Paisius. It's in one of his spiritual counsels. He says, essentially, life in the modern world is going to be a lot harder for modern man. And that those that just remain faithful to the end in the last times, just those who just remain faithful in the modern times will receive a martyr's crown because of how difficult that alone is. And imagine, like you said, it was never even a thought when you were growing up. But now all these young people now not only have to contend with the difficulty of adolescence and growing up, but they have to contend with all of these messages that they are getting, and how it's said to them, how important it is for them to understand if they're really the right gender, or if they're straight, or if they're gay, or how they think about this thing or the other thing. And growing up's hard enough. I can't imagine if that was part of the question for me, because it wasn't. I just, it wasn't really out there that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly important subject, and it is something that the church has dealt with from the very beginning. So, just as a summary to our conversation,
Yes.
you're saying that the soul is sexless,
Yes.
right? So, we
Yes.
don't have sexed souls.
Yes.
The soul receives its sex because we're body soul unities. Is that correct?
Right. So the human, I wouldn't say the soul receives sex, just simply to keep the
The
rhetorical
soul is
distinction, but
right,
but
right,
the
right, right, right.
but the human person itself is definitively sexed on account of the body. And because the human person is the unity of body and soul and not one without the other, we can say that this sex is a given fact.
And again, this is an important distinction to make, right? That the soul is not sex. That has always been the position of historic Christianity.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a question in philosophy until the second century with Apelles the heretic, who believed in the pre-existence of souls, which is essentially why he believed that souls were sexed, because sex was stamped on the body from the soul.
Yeah, and even Apelles the heretic didn't take this to the logical conclusion that we have in our culture.
Exactly. No, there was no question for him that men were men and women were women. Even though he believed that the soul was sexed, there was no misplacement of a female internal with a male external.
Ideas have consequences, bad ideas have victims, and few ideas in recent history are worse than wokeism, a social and mental disease that is wreaking havoc on sanity and common sense. That's why the upcoming special edition of the Christian Research Journal tackles this dangerous ideology head on. To receive your copy, visit equip.org, that's equip.org, or call 888-7000-CRI, that's 888-7000-CRI.